Wally woke up one pleasant April morning and saw through his bedroom window that the sky was pink. A month ago, this most likely would have terrified him. However, the whole world had been changing recently, not just his personal life, but large-scale things as well. The sky changing color was certainly one of the most noticeable, but it didn't affect him that much, so he elected to ignore it. Instead of running and screaming, as he might have done not long ago, he got out of bed and went to brush his teeth. He didn't bother styling his hair, no one did that anymore. That was one of the first changes he noticed. He had stopped by a small coffee shop on his way to work one morning, and saw that he was the only one with orderly hair. Everyone else looked as though they had just crawled out of bed. After receiving several odd looks from the strangers in line, he ruffled his own hair to match. Later that same day, he asked his office receptionist what the deal was. "What do you mean?" the man at the desk responded. "I mean, why did no one brush their hair?" Brush their hair. Yes, he was growing frustrated. Why does everyone look so disheveled? Is this a joke of some kind? Wally gave up. Yeah, it's a joke. He went back to his desk and sat down. Nothing else seemed out of the ordinary, so he tried his best not to react. People do weird things sometimes, he thought. I'm sure it'll make sense sooner or later. It never did. And now, the sky was pink. After brushing his teeth, he got dressed, put some folders into his backpack, and went to work. People using backpacks instead of briefcases was one of his favorite changes. It just made more sense in his mind. For the most part, he had gotten used to things changing around him, but even he had to admit that the sky being pink was a bit surreal. However, no one around him was making any sort of fuss about it, and so, neither would he. It was growing hard to remember what the world used to look like. The hair thing was what really brought his attention to the sudden strangeness, but thinking back on it, it almost definitely wasn't the first change. He remembered going to lock his apartment door on the way out and realizing that the keyhole was upside down. Strange, he thought at the time. He could have sworn it was the other way around. Now he wasn't so sure. He had no way of knowing how many changes he had missed. How was he to know if the pavement at his feet had always been this color, or had the same chemical structure, or if it hadn't changed ever so slightly in shape or size? He stopped thinking about that. These thoughts led him nowhere. They never had. The only thing he could do was continue on with his life in the present. He kept walking, one foot in front of the other, one thing at a time. That had become his motto. The world could change all it wanted. He would keep living his life. What else could he do except live his life one event at a time? As he passed the coffee shop, he was tempted to stop in, but decided against it. Going in would only remind him of the changes. There were at least 1,000 tiny changes in that building alone. It was simply too much. Why would they make straws out of paper? He remembered paper straws existing before the change, but they certainly weren't common. They say it's an environmental thing, but they still come wrapped in plastic? Why would that change? He derailed that train of thought and focused on his way forward. One foot in front of the other, one thing at a time. He arrived at the office a few minutes early and sat down at his desk in his little cubicle. He could see a few stray hairs sticking out from above the half wall in front of him. He was about to tell Sharon, the person on the other side, that she might want to do something about that, before remembering that this was normal now. He ran his hand through his own hair to make sure it was sufficiently natural looking. Despite all the changes in the world, his work was the same as it had always been. Forms were still forms. They still had to be filled out. They still had to be filed. That was how he passed the first half of his day, typing this and that on his computer. Was the B key always in the second row? It doesn't matter. He got up occasionally to print a thing or to ask someone a question, but generally didn't leave his chair. It was all very important. It was all as it should be. Soon enough, it was time for lunch. He pulled his sandwich out of the fridge and began to eat. Did the door always open that way? Doesn't matter. Did anyone catch the bevel ball game? Asked Randy as he entered the break room. Why do they call it bevel ball if you play it with a cube? Asked Sharon. A cube really isn't a ball, now is it? That's beside the point, says Randy, who then proceeded to tell everyone within earshot his opinions on the game. Wally lost himself in thought and let the conversation happen around him. Luckily for him, his thoughts floated around normal topics. He thought about what he would make for dinner. He thought about that trip to Rome he had taken last summer. He thought about the geese he saw on his way to work. What do you think, Wally? Sharon's voice snapped him back to reality. He shook his head a bit. Sorry, what was it? Do you think it should have counted? The last goal, do you think it should have counted? I don't know, I didn't see it. They all gave him funny looks, but resumed the conversation, leaving him back to his thoughts. Soon, lunch was over, and everyone went back to work. The tedium continued. The papers continued to flow from screen to desk to desk to desk to cabinet to trash. It was hard to see the purpose of it all, but Wally didn't care. It probably had a purpose at one point or another, but maybe that's just another change I'll have to get used to. An hour passed before his boss stopped by to ask him some questions. Wally, she began, I know this doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but for the sake of keeping things professional, can you please stop writing in green? Stick to the standard blue or black, if you'd please. Is green not professional anymore? It never was. Right, yeah, sorry. I'll be more professional in the future. The rest of the day passed without incident. That night, Wally laid awake in bed, no longer able to suppress the questions about the changing world that constantly threatened to invade his mind. Why is this happening? Why is it just me? What even is happening? Is the world really changing, or am I? Or is it both? Am I going crazy? Am I somehow hopping between parallel universes that are almost identical? Am I causing this somehow? Why won't anyone else acknowledge the absurdity of it all? Why won't anyone else acknowledge the absurdity of it all?